A commenter suggested I should make more videos, so I'll just make this one about the movie Holmes and Watson. Some people I told about seeing this movie did not even know that it had come out. It came out in January. I saw it in January, so this video is going to be a little bit rough because I'm trying to remember a movie that I saw in January. When I was seeing it, I so thoroughly expected it to be bad and fun to talk about that I had a notebook with me and I was writing notes in the dark and just writing down everything that happened in the movie. However, I don't have that notebook now, so I just have to try to remember this. Basically, I guess I've just always been interested in the idea of going to see a really bad movie in theaters. Like, obviously I've been to see The Room a lot of times, but that's with, like, Room fans, and I've probably seen a few other bad movies in contexts like that. But that's kind of different from going to see, like, a new movie that is really unpopular and just seeing it in a theater where no one is there. So, I've always wanted to do that. I was hoping to do it with Welcome to Marwen, because that sounded like an impressively bad movie. But I ended up waiting too long, and it was so unsuccessful that it was removed from, like, every theater in San Francisco and the Bay Area, so I wasn't able to see it. So I decided to go see Holmes and Watson. Yeah, so if you were not aware of this movie, which is quite understandable, it's just a comedy parody of Sherlock Holmes with Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly, and I think the most quintessential line from the movie is, "We should invent a restaurant called the International House of Cakes stacked on top of other cakes." Is this a joke, or is this just something that you or anyone else would just say when you were drunk and laugh at drunkenly? Like, it was real bad. And I guess, like, I found it to be, like, a really funny experience. Like, I don't think I've ever... At least I could probably count on one hand the amount of times that I've, like, laughed so much at a movie. Like, and that's not because it was good, but I think there's just something about jokes that are, like, trying really, 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 really hard and, like, are not funny that, like, is really funny. And the whole experience was just, like, special because I've never been to a movie experience like this before. There were, like... Let me tell you the people that were there. I can list them very quickly. There was a couple who left. There was a man by himself eating an entire meal who left. They all left during the movie. There was a girl with her friend or boyfriend or girlfriend, I can't remember. But, like, this girl obviously had come to hate watch the movie, and, like, throughout the movie, like, she just would be like, "Fuck this." She just was, like, yelling in horror about it. At one point, the movie references Titanic, and so they just randomly bring in Billy Zane, and all the characters point out that Billy Zane is there. And, like, at this point, that girl just, like, lost her mind, and she was like, "So stupid, Billy Zane, because Billy Zane was in the movie Titanic." And, like, you know, she had no concerns about yelling in the theater, which was understandable because almost no one was there. And, like, the final people that I can think of were... I would have thought they were a family. It was a man, a woman, and a little boy, but it came off as if it was a mom and her son and their weird friend, because the guy didn't act like... He didn't interact with the boy, and he barely interacted with the mom. Like, I don't know if he was embarrassed to be at the movie or something, but, like, when they all came in, he wasn't even looking at them. And then later I saw them all walking down the street, and he was walking separately from them, but they obviously had gone to the movie together. Anyway, those were my fellow viewers at Holmes and Watson. I'll just tell you about it. Holmes and Watson begins with Sherlock Holmes' childhood, and he's being bullied. And some of the comments the other kids say to him are, "Oh, I'm going to bully him because he looks poor. And he has a pet turtle." And they say, "What kind of stupid dog is that?" Then they trick him into kissing a horse's ass. And he's so traumatized that there's a scene where the little boy uncries, which means instead of crying, he, like, sucks all of his sadness inside him. And the little boy playing Sherlock Holmes really committed to this. He was like... And that's how he did it. And then it's like, that's how he became a genius. And then when he grew up, he had no feelings. You know, he's constantly like, "I'm as high as a kite from cocaine. Where's my cocaine?" That's probably 50% of the dialogue in the movie. He's really, really mean to Watson. I would say this is the one thing about the movie that is kind of clever, I guess. Like, in that I thought it was actually sort of like a funny satire on Sherlock Holmes and like genius characters, I guess, that like he's just really shitty to Watson and just like treats him like shit, and often does things like poison Watson or like play horrible tricks on him just to sort of like test out a hypothesis, and like thinks that's like a totally normal and cool thing to do, like to the extent that the story has an emotional arc. It's about how Sherlock is like really shitty to Watson, and how like Watson is upset by this, and Sherlock eventually decides to be nicer to him at the end, which is cool, I guess. But yeah, to the extent that there's an emotional arc. They meet the Queen. She's very old, but they keep saying she's so hot, and that's a joke because she's an old lady. There also was a scene with the Queen where they think that they've accidentally killed her, and they plan to cut up her body and put it in a trunk or flush it down a toilet or something like that. And like, actually at this point, like, I considered walking out, and obviously I had like, you know, I was not planning to walk out at all. Obviously I wanted to have the real experience, but like, you know, I'd gotten through all this time where like Watson and like Rebecca Hall, who shouldn't have to be in movies like this, like they have sex on top of a corpse that they were both dissecting because they're both doctors. Also, there's a whole thing about how like they don't believe Rebecca Hall is a doctor because of sexism, so whenever she says she's a doctor, they say like, oh, her brain must be like addled. That's the type of humor. There's also a very long sequence where they talk about like, man, I'm so glad that like America doesn't have kings and queens, and instead they have a system where they can like elect a president. Like, I bet that they would never elect like a bad president, and like I bet that if the majority of Americans voted for someone, that person would definitely be president. And like, as far as I can remember, this whole series of jokes was like an hour long, and it was like yet another scene where like the jokes just went on and on, but they were like never actually funny. It was like, okay, we'll keep making a joke about how like Victorians wouldn't believe a woman would be a doctor. We'll keep making a joke about how like Trump exists, and like we'll just keep saying those lines for like 50 lines, and just through brute force it will work. And I actually did find this charming. Like, they just kept trying. Where was I? Anyway, I'd gotten through all these disgusting things. There's also a scene where, I actually liked this because it was kind of a parody of Sherlock or something. Like, Sherlock Holmes is peeing, and he goes through calculations in his head on, like, how to pee at the exact right angle so that he doesn't, like, pee on himself. But then he does pee on himself because he didn't open his pants, I guess. But anyway, lots of bodily fluids, lots of gross things. But for some reason, when they got to the point where they were like, we're going to, like, we've killed this old lady and we're going to, like, cut up her body and, like, put it in all these different places, like, I actually was, like, suddenly so disgusted that, like, I was about to leave. But it was a fake out. So thank goodness for that. I got to have the real experience after all. What else happens in this movie? There is a scene where Sherlock goes to see Mycroft, and it's in this like fancy salon that's only for really smart people, and Mycroft is played by Hugh Laurie, who has no lines. Like, the geniuses just like communicate telepathically, so they just look at each other and like voiceover. And they're trying to communicate telepathically, but Watson is there and he like isn't smart. So like at a certain point, Watson tries really, really hard to telepathically enter the conversation, and so suddenly his dialogue, his thoughts start coming in, but his thoughts are just like thoughts, thinky thoughts, I'm thinking. And then they remove him and they send him to a room that's just for the sidekicks of smart people that aren't actually smart. I'm pretty sure this room contained a dog and a pig, but don't quote me on that. Things like that happen. It's really hard to remember all of the things that happen in this movie. To be fair, I was drinking during the movie, but it was really quite an experience. Like, I'm not sure if I would have like laughed so much or enjoyed it so much if I'd seen the movie in any other context, but I think the fact that like I knew that it was going to be really bad, and that like the movie was just trying so hard, but there was like hardly a spark of like anything that was ever actually like a genuinely funny joke, but they were trying so hard. Like, I don't know, it just reminds me of this time when I was a kid and I was like really trying to interact with some other kids. Like, my mom came up to me, like tapped me on the shoulder and was like, tone it down. Like, I feel like this movie was just like that, but like for hours and done by adults and for money. Where was I? Well, basically what happens is, towards the end, Sherlock decides that Watson is actually responsible for the murder he's trying to solve. And so Watson is about to be executed. And then suddenly, Sherlock bursts into song, and there's like a huge, like over the top musical number that's really long. And like it's like Sherlock is like, oh my gosh, I've never had a feeling before. What's happening? I'm feeling love. I care about Watson. Then there's like a split screen, and like they each sing, and like it goes on for a really long time, and finally Sherlock rescues Watson. And there's a whole thing about how there's a bomb on the Titanic, but they managed to stop the bomb from going off. And then there's yet another sequence, sort of like the Trump sequence, where Sherlock is like, everybody, like, I just want you to know that Watson kept the Titanic from blowing up. So because of Watson, the Titanic is going to sail. And so if anybody in your life is going to go on the Titanic, it's because of Watson, and it's Watson's responsibility that these people are going to be in the Titanic. Watson put them there. Isn't that great? Like, I don't think I could even convey to you how long this went on. Like, there was just so many really just odd jokes like this. So that happened. Then what happens? I feel like I had one more thing to share about the movie, but I'm completely blanking on it. Well, that's basically it. Those are basically all the things about this movie. So, it was really, really a fun experience for me. I hope that I can, like, have another experience like that with a movie, but I'm not sure that I can top it, just because I think kind of, like, the context just made it really fun. Actually, I sort of regret making this video. I feel like it's probably not very funny. But anyway, the thing was, then I was going home, it was kind of late at night, and I was walking under this, like, underpass, and there was, like, all of these guys on the sidewalk, like, drawing on the sidewalk with chalk, and so I went to look at it and, like, was kind of having trouble reading it in the dark, and the guy was like, oh, here, oh, I wish I still had it. Can't find it. The guy was like, oh, here, he gave me his, like, card or whatever, or, like, their organization's card. It turned out they were, like, an animal rights organization, and they were, like, writing this really long message about, like, you shouldn't eat animals, and, like, you shouldn't use animal products and stuff, and so they were writing it on the sidewalk to, like, tell people about their cause. And so the guy was like, oh, like, that's us, this is, like, how we spend our Saturday night, like, pretty cool, right? Self-deprecatingly. And so I just, like, left and didn't say anything about how I was spending my Saturday night.